Bitcoin is the sun and everyone orbits around it. We need a financial rails that is neutral and doesn't pick sides. And Bitcoin is the neutral rails for a network of value. Bitcoin is not competing against other crypto, but it's competing against other alternative stores of wealth.
Garden.
Hey Marvin, nice to see you. Thanks for joining the chat.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, great to be here.
As we speak, I think the announcement of Garden's partnership with Maestro just went live like an hour ago. So super excited to be working with you guys as one of the solvers here at Garden. As part of that, I was very curious to just catch up with you and learn a bit more about how you started personally. What is Maestro? What does it do? A lot of these questions because I have some understanding, but it's always good to actually hear from the team itself. So yeah, would love to know a little bit about you first. About, what's your background? How did you get started in crypto?
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, I just want to say, I'm really working with Ghana has been very fantastic, and this partnership is we're really proud of it. And I'm sure we'll have more time to talk more about it. But yeah, it's been a real pleasure working with your team. You guys are really great. And so about myself, yes, so I have kind of a diverse background. I think most people in crypto, you can't just go to school for blockchain. I studied mechanical engineering. I ended up never even using it. I went into then AI, the early days of AI when it was still called machine learning and deep learning. And I moved to San Francisco, which was the best decision I could have made. And I was very deep into the early days of like deep learning. And I joined a couple of companies, one that was, Y Combinator, building deep learning frameworks. And then I went into biotech and applied deep learning methods to genomics data. It was actually quite fun. We built very complex algorithms that took DNA sequences that we processed with these very expensive machines, and we would predict if people had cancer or not. So we're basically building a cancer screening test. And when I joined the team, we were just 80 people, and when I left, we were like 400. And now that test is going through like FDA approval to be one of the first kind of like AI-driven cancer detection tests. With that, I learned a lot of things. I worked with very competent people, very technical people, cross-disciplinary, and just building complex data infrastructure and data pipeline. And that's why I met my co-founder, Varus. And then around 2020, with the DeFi boom on Ethereum, it kind of like got my curiosity. And so we explored my co-founder kind of different ideas. And then we ended up just coming up with like, hey, let's build infrastructure. Let's build like a company that offers very reliable, low latency, high availability infrastructure for all these dApps that are building on blockchain. And that's kind of how Maestro got started. And fast forward today, we're powering over 200 different applications that are using our APIs and our data platform to power the apps that are serving millions of users. And that's why I think it puts us in a very good place to run the solver, because really our infrastructure is really battle tested. We're running all these nodes. We have a very strong mempool monitoring system and transaction propagation system that really makes running the solver run at its optimal operation. But we've really expanded from that. And now I would say we're more a full stack financial platform. And I like to say we want to power the Bitcoin economy. And so what's the Bitcoin economy? And I think it comes in multiple places. You have the Bitcoin data, which is what we really started off with our infrastructure. But then you have Bitcoin yield. So being able to we've built an institutional grade vault infrastructure that allows any on-chain strategies and yield strategies to be brought on chain and provide like really premium Bitcoin yield solutions. And then lastly, you need credit, Bitcoin credit. And that's where we've built with mezzamine, where you can basically take out loans as a miner and using the economic activity of the mining industry to power very powerful secure credit loans. And for lenders, we basically get paid from mining blocks, right? Right now, a lot of yield. Bitcoin is quite special. You have mining, and we're offering the possibility for people to get paid in mining blocks. And so that's really kind of gives you the full life cycle of what you would need to have a healthy, productive capital market on Bitcoin and, bring about this Bitcoin economy, which I think is really what we're after as an ecosystem.
That's great. You always keep hearing the term BTCFi, and I feel after hearing the full plan and what you're executing with Maestro, It actually feels like BTC is great. One thing I realized, we actually have a similar background. I was also a mechanical engineer in
Really?
university. Yeah, ended up getting into machine learning robotics. I worked at MathWorks. They make the software called MATLAB, if you've ever heard of it. So I used to work as a robotics. So very interesting to see similar background. And I also ended up getting into crypto. I always used to think when I started up, it's like robot money. I was working on real robots, but crypto is basically like robot money. You can program it, and it has its own life, and no one can corrupt it. So that's one of the great things about crypto. You mentioned, when you started out, you were looking at Ethereum, but now you're building Bitcoin infrastructure and Bitcoin end to end, financial systems. What interested you to, kind of pitch tent on the Bitcoin side and dedicate a lot of your time on this?
Yes. So, you know, Ethereum is not going away, right? I think we need to realize that we're going to live in a multi-chain world and a multi-chain ecosystem. And I think that's also one big selling point of Garden is realizing, hey, we will need to go from chain to chain and have a way to very streamline and move Bitcoin freely across these ecosystems. But I think people sometimes just don't understand that there are different modes to capture. And so, if you want to run applications on smart contracts, Ethereum is kind of really the engine for that. And you've got other competitors, Base and Solana, but there's also the financial aspect. And the financial aspect is, where does value accrue? And you can't have value accruing to 10 different tokens, because the way finance work is it's self-compounding, and the deeper the liquidity in one type of assets, the more safe and reliable it becomes, right? And that's why in traditional finance, like you have everyone wants to go to the same exchange, because the same exchange has all the stocks and the deepest liquidity and the lowest slippage. So there is a natural consolidation of financial power. So that's Bitcoin. Bitcoin is really consolidating a lot of the value. Doesn't mean people are not doing experiments, but over time, if you see crypto as like a place to store value, Bitcoin is the only one that has really that narrative locked in, and I don't see that being dethroned. The narrative that someone will dethrone Bitcoin maybe was popular couple of cycles ago, but I think everyone has accepted that Bitcoin is the sun and everyone orbits around it. And so, since we think about building the financial system of the future, right? If you travel abroad, I live in the US, but if you travel abroad, you realize that most countries have very broken financial system, and it's very hard to access credit. It's very hard to even trust your banks for your deposits. But now, even in the US, the financial system is being degraded. And internationally, this financial system is used as leverage. I mean, we're seeing in wars, it's like used as sanctions, just like a weapon. And so, we need a financial rails that is neutral and doesn't pick sides, right? And, we already have that. That's the internet. The internet is this neutral rails for a network of information. What Bitcoin is the neutral rails for a network of value. And I think as a world that globalizes and that is becoming highly digital, we deserve a neutral rails for value. That system is going to outcompete the systems that are using coercion and their power to subjugate others. So to me, it's just the place to be if you're serious about building a long-term financial system for the future. And that's what Maestro is really building, is for this Bitcoin economy that's coming. And it doesn't mean that Bitcoin is going to power the entire world's economy. You may have a multipolar world, right, where you have competing currencies, competing financial system, but they all going to have their moat, right? The competitive advantage. And the moat of Bitcoin is this neutral financial rails. And to me, Bitcoin is not competing against other crypto. I mean, it is, but I think that battle is won. The real battle is Bitcoin is competing against other alternative stores of wealth and other alternative means of exchange. And that's really where it gets interesting.
Nice. It's a very good mental model about between internet and Bitcoin. As someone who's been building on Bitcoin, have you found it challenging? Like, are there any challenges you faced in the process of building infrastructure products on Bitcoin? Because Bitcoin is a proof of work chain, and the capability to program is not as simple as compared to other chains. So, what instruments do we need to make sure that it is scalable to actually kind of power the world's finance?
Yeah. So, Bitcoin has its drawbacks in terms of limited, like you said, programmability, flexibility. And some say it's a feature, right? Its simplicity means it's secure. It's not going through upgrades very often, and it's kind of like this core, simple but high variable network. And then Ethereum is kind of like the opposite, right? Highly programmable and evolves quickly. And so, I don't have a crystal ball. Building where people really are building. Last last year or two, there were a lot of excitement around tokens, runes, and ordinals. People have been layer twos, so people are constantly innovating and trying new things. And so, some of these ideas work, some of these ideas don't work. So we don't quite know exactly what that final standard will be. And it may be something that actually was staring at us right away. It's just like, why don't we use Ethereum as a execution engine and Bitcoin as the settlement layer? So with like, protocols like Garden, if you can abstract away going from Bitcoin to wrap Bitcoin, and you can do your kind of like financial economic activity on Ethereum, but then at any point you can then settle back to native Bitcoin and really abstract that away in a simple way. Do you need L2s, right? Do you need programmability on Bitcoin? You're kind of trying to recreate this DeFi ecosystem that already exists. And it's what actually is missing is a reliable linking layer, right? And I think this intent-based system is really taking the ecosystem by storm. Everything's turning into intent-based, right? And so everyone's moving towards that way of thinking, which actually is very flexible and allows you to do a lot of these kind of cross-chain interactions. So to me, I feel that's where things are going. But I think there's a lot of things about Bitcoin that people are not leveraging. And that's why we want to focus actually on the hard problems. So when we start with data, we're really focusing on mempool monitoring, mempool tracking, propagation of these transactions across the topology. This is very low level stuff. We actually, under the hood, have rebuilt the Bitcoin node to our needs to be extremely good at syncing and processing data across the network. And that means our APIs have this like competitive advantage to give you the most live data. And we're taking the same approach when we're building our yield vaults and our credit loans for miners. On Ethereum, you have a proof of stake. You can stake your ETH and you get essentially this risk-free yield, right? It's like, getting yield on your treasury bonds, right? It's kind of the lowest risk yield. It's the base yield of an asset. And, people assume that Bitcoin doesn't have that. But in a way, Bitcoin has it through proof of work. It's just the yield is being paid to the miners. And so there is this incredible amount of economic activity in Bitcoin. These miners are buying these huge data centers, putting a lot of money to buy these chips. They're buying electricity. They're essentially turning electrons into bits, right? Electrons into money. They're monetizing electricity in the form of Bitcoin. And so there is real economic activity that's being generated. To me, the yield doesn't get more real than when it comes from a business that generates revenue through economic activity, right? This is not delta neutral algorithmic strategies or token incentive through staking. We've tried that, right? It doesn't work. What we need for the ecosystem to grow is to fuel real economic activity to put ideal Bitcoin to be productive. And so, long story short, we need to find protocols that integrate the mining economy with the Bitcoin economy. And that's what we've done with mezzamine. We're allowing Bitcoin holders to basically invest directly into miners and basically get a share of all future block rewards. And so the way you can think about it, every week, every month, you get your yield in Bitcoin. It's essentially the first proof of work yield on the market that allows you to earn straight from the proof of work ecosystem. And so I think that's the type of yield that is reliable, it's sustainable, and it's based on real economic output.
How do you think a traditional Bitcoin holder thinks about things? For example, the image that generally people have is someone who's very like privacy maxi. It's like very particular about where they put their money and everything. So let's say when you're building out these products like mezzamine, where you're trying to actually build a very simple way for someone to deploy their Bitcoin and actually earn some regular yield on top of it. How's the response been? Like, does it require education, or what has that journey been like?
Yeah, so I try to be careful and not put the Bitcoin community into to one box. I think there's a lot of diversity of thoughts and micro communities that also don't get along with each other, right? And we saw it when we got into the ordinal and the runes. It really
Yeah.
created like a divide across the
Yeah.
community, and people just have different opinions. But the nice thing with this permissioning system is that you can have a different opinion, but if the networks allows it, you can do it, right? And it will be done. We're trying to, we're actually not trying to convince anyone. We're trying to give a solution to people that already have that problem, right? So on one end, if you talk to miners, running a mining operation is extremely difficult financially because it's very capex heavy. That means you have to buy a lot of hardware upfront, and then with that upfront spend, then you can increase your hash rate, and then you basically recoup your cost through block rewards. But the price that only works if you have tons of cash upfront to spend, and that's only available for like really large miners, like the top four that have either are public or have access to like financing to banking. And that's why you're seeing a lot of centralization around the block productions. But even if you're a medium miner, it's really hard to go to bank and get a loan. And these loans are very predatory. The terms are not great. It's just because it's considered a high risk business because a lot of these loans are repaid in dollars. And so with the price volatility, you know, the Bitcoin drops, you can't make your payments, you go under, you get liquidated. We've switched it around. We're like, hey, why don't we actually don't create loans in dollars? We create loans in Bitcoin so that your monthly payment is denominated in Bitcoin. So it doesn't matter what the price does. The price can go down, the price can go up. You pay the same amount. And you are like, well, why would someone accept that? Well, their revenue is in Bitcoin, right? Every week, a miner knows I'm mining 1.2 Bitcoin. So if their payment is like a Bitcoin, then they know mathematically that as long as they can maintain that block production, they will pay it regardless of the price. So suddenly you've reduced the volatility factor, which is how a lot of miners go bankrupt. And in 2022, I don't know if people remember, but the crash of Bitcoin destroyed a lot of Bitcoin companies, very good Bitcoin companies that were, we're not talking about tiny, companies that couldn't handle the volatility. It's really good mining company disappeared, and that led to the consolidation of the hash rate. So the secondary effect of providing healthy financing options to miners is that we help decentralize the network. Actually, we allow medium miners that often have access to really amazing like source of electricity. So we work with people all around the world. And more recently, we announced a loan with Size Mining that has mining rigs in Paraguay and Ethiopia. And they mine Bitcoin like 100% renewable energy, right? Completely carbon free. And they have access to really cheap energy. But what were they missing? They were missing access to financing. And so we allowed them to open a loan on our platform, and they're able to borrow and now that loan is live, and it pays 9% fixed APY in Bitcoin, which is the largest I think you can find on the market right now. And they're more than happy to pay for it, right? And then just to finish up, on the other end, you have all these Bitcoin holders and Bitcoin treasury companies that have amassed humongous amount of Bitcoin, and it's sitting idle, and they're trying to find productive way to put that capital to work. And Bitcoin staking is just not sustainable, and you have sometimes like these Bitcoin yield delta neutral strategies are also very volatile. So there's a huge demand for yield that is sustainable. And so what we're doing is we're not convincing anyone. We're literally just going to the people that are looking for financing and give them loans, and going to people that are looking for real yield and connecting them to these miners. And so we see ourselves as more like the marketplace maker for this already pumped out demand that is already there.
Great, great. What is Maestro's plan for the coming future? I think you've already have the mezzamine platform. It's out, and what's coming up for the next couple of years?
Yeah, so we're really building this full stack financial platform to really power the Bitcoin economy. So with mezzamine, we have what we call Bitcoin credit. And so it's a native on-chain credit marketplace, and it's secured and backed by mining. So I would say these are the type of loans that's just never been done before. You can look at any loans on DeFi or other protocols. None of them really are backed by mining production activities. So that's kind of a unique aspect. And then we have our yield vault. So that's like something actually we'll be announcing for Garden is we are wrapping the solver that we're running for Garden with a compliant kind of vault abstraction. And so that means anyone can come in, deposit into the vault, and earn from the Garden solver. And to explain for people how Garden solver makes money is a solver is essentially a market maker, right? Someone wants to move some native Bitcoin to wrap Bitcoin. They create a bid, and then we fill that order. By filling this order, we earn a spread on that trade. So that means all our pools are Bitcoin to wrap Bitcoin. So we're not getting exposed to currency change. We're one-to-one backed, and we're just earning a fixed fee on top of every trade. And it's also extremely capital efficient, right? So with a few $1,000,000 in the solver, you can do tens of millions of volume. And so that's also a big advantage of solvers around compared to AMMs, for example, which is the opposite, where often the TVL is so much larger than the actual volume that's going through it. And people say use TVL as an advantage, but actually it shows that it's extremely capital inefficient. And so what we're doing is like, okay, well, how do we turn this into a yield product? And so we've built this vault infrastructure that allows depositors to basically fill the market maker. The market maker makes fees from trading, and those fees then gets computed and redistributed to the vault participants, and that is paid back in Bitcoin. And so the beauty of what we've built is Bitcoin in, Bitcoin out, right? You never have to like go to Ethereum or get some right Bitcoin. You can just connect your Bitcoin wallet, and the fees are paid back to you in Bitcoin. And that vault is basically a proof of concept for our vault marketplace that's coming later this year, where we're going to be introducing a number of different vaults. And the goal is to aggregate what we call the premium Bitcoin yield strategies, right? And that means only strategies that pay back in Bitcoin and are denominated in Bitcoin. And, mezzamine is one of them, Garden is one of them, but we have a couple under our sleeves that are very interested. And I think that would give you the possibility as, let's say, an asset manager in a Bitcoin yield fund, or maybe a CFO at a Bitcoin treasury company, to come to our platform and basically allocate your Bitcoin reserves across multiple yield instruments and be able to rebalance across these instruments. And now we've really started to create like investment portfolio that allows people with Bitcoin reserves to allocate into different strategies and then kind of like create like a blended yield across their reserves and allow them to compound their Bitcoin. And I think Bitcoin treasury companies are really loving this because they're looking for ways, right, to use that Bitcoin productively and be able to invest it and deploy it in different yield strategies where they can control exactly the level of risk, the level of yield, the level of lockups, and kind of balance that around. I think it's something that just doesn't exist. And so that's kind of the long-term vision for us is this kind of end-to-end vault marketplace for people that want to deploy their Bitcoin reserve and compound it.
That's actually very beautiful. I love how you're structuring the products. Each product is actually, like you said, it's not delta neutral. It's very real, activity that is generating yield. And Bitcoin out. It's as simple as it gets. You put your Bitcoin and you get your yield back in Bitcoin. It's very straightforward. I really love that approach. There are a lot of projects that do Bitcoin yield, but they don't do it like this. It's like they're putting in some yield marketplaces promising crazy high yields that are probably not even possible. I think this is like the right way to go about it, and I'm really excited to work with you guys on the wall that you're building with Garden and you being one of the solvers here.
And by the way, we're using Garden under the hood for every single product, right? So I think that's important to mention that whether it's mezzamine or all our vaults, Garden is deeply integrated into what we do. And that's actually it's one key component that allows us to offer this Bitcoin in, Bitcoin out, and really allow Bitcoin to flow very freely across those different network and create this unique user experience where now you don't have to create all these complex hubs that people have done in previously. From your perspective, it's a very streamlined experience. And so I just want to point out that this would not be possible without this Garden integration. And so we're not just running the solver, we actually are users of Garden heavily under the hood throughout our products.
Really appreciate you saying that. We also have a similar thought process as Maestro. We've been building on Bitcoin for I think almost 4 to 5 years now. We see the value that Bitcoin will add to this world, and are really sad to see, at the beginning, the kind of tech that is built around Bitcoin. And I think we're all working towards the same goal of actually make Bitcoin like as usable as the internet. I think that's the goal, and yeah. Cool. Anything else you want to say before we close off? I think we had a great chat. Loved hearing about the product you guys are building, and super excited for our event that's happening at BTC Vegas. I'm feeling very jealous that I can't be there and see Tim Draper in person, but you've put together a very good show.
Yes, we're organizing this great, we're co-hosting this event in Bitcoin Vegas, in a couple of weeks. So that's gonna be a lot of fun. Maybe we can add the link in the description. We booked this restaurant on the beach. It's gonna be brunch, drinks, and food for everyone. And the topic is Bitcoin capital market, how leaders are, transforming passive reserves into productive capital. So we're really careful in creating, some of the best guests that people are asset managers, Bitcoin investors, Bitcoin miners that are really trying to turn Bitcoin into a real economic powerhouse and build economic systems on top of it. We'll have Tim Drapers to come and speak. Draper Associate is one of our lead investor in our last round, and they've been really fantastic in supporting us. Tim has had like a very ambitious vision for Bitcoin from the get-go. When it wasn't cool, when it was kind of crazy, and every time I meet him, he always reminds me to be more ambitious and really solve the big problems, right? It's not just building another yield product or another kind of like wallet. It's really like, hey, like what does the world need that Bitcoin can do? And there's a lot out there in the world that Bitcoin has not been adopted. So if we even capture 3, 4, 5% of world commerce, that would completely transform our ecosystems. So we need projects that have this ambition to be like, how do we lay down the rails and the building blocks for this next phase of adoption? And how do we build something that the real world needs that is useful? And it's not just hobbyists and people that are passionate about Bitcoin that use it, but people that use it because it actually helps them in their business, run their business, and bring real value to it. And that's really the test, right? That's the real product market fit is your solution solving a problem, a latent problem that people naturally get drawn to and use. So that's where we're at. And I feel like Garden is on the same mission. And if you want to come join us at Vegas and chat with us, I would love to. The event I think is on the 28th in the morning. So yeah, looking forward to see you guys.
For sure, we'll be there. Thanks a lot for joining the call today, Marvin. I know it's like super early, but thanks for making the time.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Have a nice day.
You too.